Live from Sin City, it's the Socks and Pinstripes Podcast. And now, here's the star of the show, Diet Dr. Griffin!
The best Westerns. This is Diet Dr. Griffin back with another episode of the Socks and Pinstripes Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the NL and the AL West. Who's the best of the Western teams? Like with before, we will be going from bottom to the top. And let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Like, rate, subscribe, yada, yada, yada. You guys know the drill. Listen to other podcasts and know that they ask you the same thing. So I'm going to ask you the same thing as well. Like, rate, and subscribe so we can keep this thing moving along and growing. Starting with the American League West, we have the Oakland A's, who are arguably the worst team in baseball by a country mile. They don't have much talent, whether it's in the lineup or in the pitching side of things with the bullpen or in their starting rotation. Zach Geloff is a promising prospect. He had a decent second half when he was called up, but there's really not much else there at the moment. Next, we have the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, Los Angeles. These guys are honestly not much better than the A's, even though they have major league talent on there. These guys fell off massively last year after losing Ohtani and have really done nothing in the offseason outside of picking up a couple of bullpen arms like Robert Stevenson. And I'm not even sure how good he's going to be because he could be just one of those products of Tampa Bay and the Angels could entirely misuse him. They do have Mike Trout still, and that does mean something, but the way that he has been the past few years, it's difficult to count on him for the entire season. And of course, you have Anthony Rendon, who hasn't played a full season since 2020, and that was only 60 games. I really think this could be a bottom five team. The Angels do not have much talent at all on the squad. At number 3 in the division is the Texas Rangers, and this definitely seems like a surprise since they just won the World Series, but they still have a very potent lineup, and they're going to be adding Evan Carter to the lineup full-time, possibly Wyatt Langford, who is one of the best prospects in all of baseball. The issue that I'm having with this team is that they do not have much starting pitching at the moment. Scherzer and DeGrom are expected to miss large parts of the season, and I'm just not sure that Nathan Eovaldi, John Gray, and Andrew Heaney are going to win enough games at the top of the Rangers rotation to keep them in it until the two hammers get back. Now, if they manage to swing for Jordan Montgomery or Snell, I might change my opinion on this, but as the roster is presently constructed, I'm just not convinced that their starting rotation will hold up. Corey Seager is also coming back from a sports hernia surgery, and it's unclear if he's going to be ready for the season and how he's going to be impacted by that. The Rangers' bullpen is also a bit shaky as they still have Jose Leclerc as their closer, and he was absolutely terrible in the postseason, and they did sign David Robertson, although he didn't have a particularly good second half with the Marlins. At the 2-hole in the AL West is the Seattle Mariners. I don't know what to make of this team's lineup, but I love their pitching. They have starting pitching depth up the yin-yang. Very, very strong group of guys with George Kirby, Luis Castillo, Logan Gilbert. And then you've got guys like Brian Woo. Let me try that again. This is early in the morning. Woo! Bryce Miller, too. These guys have a lot of pitching depth, and that's something I think will help sustain them over the course of the season. Their bullpen is pretty good. Munoz is one of the premier closers. I think he's really going to have an awesome season. The lineup is kind of middling, but I think there's enough there to keep them going. And obviously, Julio Rodriguez, I don't think we've seen his best yet. And obviously, at the top of the division is still the Houston Astros. These guys have a loaded lineup. Top to bottom, they are one of the nastiest lineups in the game. They're actually going to move Kyle Tucker into the top 4 of the lineup this year, which is something that is scary to think about because he is one of the most underrated players in all of baseball. They still have a solid pitching staff with a lot of depth. I know Verlander is hurt to start the season, and he's probably on the tail end of things, but he's still a veteran presence on that team. And they have one of the nastiest 7-8-9 combos in all of baseball when they added Josh Hader to an already stacked bullpen. When you can shorten the games like that, it takes a lot of pressure off of the rotation, and the Astros rotation is still pretty good. This is probably one of the most complete teams in the American League, and I see no reason why they're going to lose out on the division this year. Let's jump out to the NL West now. And at the 5 spot, we have the Colorado Rockies. There's really not a whole lot of talent on this team. The pitching staff is bad, and they also have to play at Coors, which never helps the pitching out. I hope Chris Bryant can come back and be something close to what he was in Chicago, but outside of that, and Nolan Jones too, there's not really a whole lot here. I hope that they can eventually rebuild it because I've kind of had a soft spot for the Colorado Rockies over the years, and I actually want to see them play well at some point. At number 4, we have the San Francisco Giants. I do not understand what this team is all about. They have a gigantic mismatch of talent on here. The rotation outside of Logan Webb is in total disarray. They signed Jordan Hicks to be a starter. That just goes to show how poorly this team is run. Now, Robbie Ray will be coming back at some point this season, but not until the second half as he's recovering from Tommy John surgery. These guys just seem to sign players and just hope that it works. They just throw money at stuff. They threw $54 million at Matt Chapman this past week. That was one of the big signings that happened. Chapman, of course, being a Boras client, turned down an over $100 million contract from, I believe, the Blue Jays earlier in the offseason and ends up settling for a $54 million contract over 3 years. And there are player options after each year, so he's likely going to walk after this season. And because he had a qualifying offer attached, the Giants are going to give up a draft pick to sign a guy who's likely going to leave. And the only reason he would stay is if he had a really bad season or he had some kind of injury concerns that would linger into the following season. So I just don't have a lot of optimism about the Giants, and adding a bunch of right-handed bats like Chapman and Soler, it just doesn't play well at that ballpark. It has with all the wind in the bay, it wreaks havoc on right-handed hitters. Like, no right-handed hitter in the history of that ballpark has hit a home run into McCovey Cove. It's a left-handed hitter's paradise. At number 3 is the San Diego Padres, and I feel like there's a lot more talent on this club than people realize, although their pitching staff isn't particularly good either. It kind of got gutted after last season. They do still have veteran starters Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish. They're expecting big things from Michael King, who was the primary asset they acquired from the Yankees in the Juan Soto trade. They still do have Fernando Tatis, who I expect is going to be much better this year, and Manny Machado as well, who's as consistent as can be of a player. And Bogarts, I think, is going to have a better season as well, having to play second base now instead of playing short. Ha-Seong Kim is on a walk year, and I still think there's a lot of talent, and they had a lot of bad luck last year. If you ran through their runs scored versus the runs they allowed last year, they were on par with the Toronto Blue Jays and were better than the Milwaukee Brewers. So just baseball can be a weird sport sometimes. I think losing Juan Soto definitely hurts them, and they're not a playoff team by any stretch, but I don't think the Padres are as bad as everybody's saying either. At number 2 is the Arizona Diamondbacks. Here's a team that got to the World Series and overachieved last year, and they made some moves to try to go back to the playoffs again this year, and I think they have a good shot at it. They improved the rotation by adding Eduardo Rodriguez from the Tigers. They made a trade for Suarez from the Mariners to help improve their lineup. They've re-signed Lourdes Gurriel, who was a good piece of that lineup. They also have Corbin Carroll still coming off of his phenomenal rookie season, and he's got a lot of upside still. They've kept a lot of their strong players as well, so I think this team can definitely step it up and has a shot at going back to the playoffs. And I don't know if it means to go back to the World Series, but I do think they have a shot at winning 90 games this year. There's a pretty complete team here. Having Paul Sewald for the entire season helps that bullpen out, and that was a major issue for them in the first half before he was acquired. And obviously at the top of the NL West is the Los Angeles Dodgers, and they could easily have the best record in all of baseball this year. They have decided that they're going to move Mookie Betts to shortstop permanently for now. That's one of the strangest statements I've ever heard. There's not a lot of holes with this team. The biggest issues I think they have are honestly defensively. They're not that good. Max Muncy's not a great defender, and I'm not sure how Mookie's glove at shortstop is going to be over the course of a season, but there's so much offensive firepower there. They have a lot of talent in the pitching rotation. The real issue with them is just health, but I'm confident that they will find a way to at least make it through the regular season, just gluing all of those guys together and figuring things out. And whatever deficiencies they have by the middle of the season, they're the Dodgers. They're going to go out and improve themselves. There's no doubt about that. This is a team that has all of the pressure on the world to win the World Series this year. And I see no reason why they're not going to make it to October winning that division. There you have it. So let's circle back to some of the news and the notes of this week. I already covered Matt Chapman's contract when I was doing my analysis of the Giants. Again, I think it's a bad deal for that team. Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell are still unsigned. They keep claiming to be talking to mystery teams, and Montgomery has been bounced around with the Red Sox quite a bit, but nothing has come around. And Snell, I haven't heard much about him, anything concrete. Speaking of the Red Sox, Lucas Giolito has got a partially torn UCL, and odds are he's going to start the season on the injured list and possibly miss the entire season. So that means that his guaranteed contract is going to kick in for sure next year, because he's not going to be a free agent and pass up on $20 million. I've heard rumblings that the Red Sox might consider guaranteeing the third year that they put on the contract to try to lower the damage financially over the next couple of years. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not, but that could be a thing. Giolito's still fairly young compared to some of the other free agent pitchers out there, and I wouldn't be surprised if they want to take a shot at him and try to rehabilitate him a bit. The Red Sox also extended Brayan Bello to a 6-year, $55 million contract, and there's also a $21 million club option at the end of that deal. This is a very interesting move financially for the team. Bello is one of the more consistent pitchers on that team, but he has yet to really, really put it all together and break out. Like, he was this guy who struggled in day games last year for some reason. It was a very weird statistic. He went 3-5 with a 6.94 ERA during 10 day games, and his night games, he had a 3.06 ERA. Just very weird stuff. But hopefully the kid will figure it out, and it could end up being a bargain. The strange thing, though, with him is that he still had 5 years of team control. So 2 more years at the league minimum, and then 3 years of arbitration. And he likely would have made less money had he gone through the whole process. So they're giving him a pay bump on the hopes that he becomes their ace. And if he does, then it'll be an absolute bargain for him. But if he somehow gets hurt or falls off, it'll be a total dumpster fire of a signing for them. It's a lot more risky than I think people realize on paper, but if it plays out the way that they all seem to think it's going to, it'll be an absolute steal down the line. Angel Hernandez was apparently in full form yesterday as he ejected Lance Lynn and Ollie Mormel in a spring training game because that's just what he does. We're going to have a fun season with him behind the plate. We kind of missed out on old Angel Hernandez last year a bit because he was injured, I think. But now he's back in full form. Yay! The Phillies actually made a big move this week, extending Zach Wheeler to a 3-year, $126 million extension, which makes him the highest paid pitcher per average year in league history. Wheeler was set to be a free agent after the season, and boy, oh boy, was this a risky move, because this is having me think about Chris Sale signing his massive extension right before he became a free agent. Because if Wheeler gets hurt this year, oh man, that's going to look horrible next year at $40 million a year. Now, pitcher-wise, he's one of the better guys out there, and I'm happy he's got his money, but boy, oh boy, I hope he stays healthy. Eddie Rosario signed with the Nationals. He should have an opportunity to start there because there's not a whole lot in that outfield in Washington. And Joey Votto is coming home to the Toronto Blue Jays. They gave him a non-roster invite, so it'll be interesting to see if he makes the team. And one thing I can tell you is that if Joey Votto makes the team this year, I will try to go out and see him at some point. And that is the show for this week. On next week's show, we will be covering the AL and the NL East divisions. Have a good week, and we'll talk next week. Bye-bye.